Hello, good evening. Welcome to North West Tonight with Roger Johnson. Thank you for joining us. Our top story. Criminals who won't attend their sentencing, like Olivia Pratt-Corbell's killer in Liverpool, could get longer jail terms. The government's announcement follows a campaign by Olivia's mum. We'll have the story for you. Also tonight, a bomb disposal expert from the Isle of Man has been killed in Ukraine, working for the charity he founded. Making the wetlands wetter, the new project to restore and improve Lancashire's Martin Mere Nature Reserve.
The 2.5 million people who live on Merseyside are celebrating the long-awaited VE Day.
How our towns and cities came together to celebrate VE Day 80 years ago.
And after most places have seen some blue sky today, it does look as though our weather is going to turn drier, with more sunshine and a little bit warmer as we head towards the weekend. All the details coming up later in the programme.
A new law which will allow judges to increase sentences for criminals who refuse to attend their sentencing has been introduced into Parliament today, and it follows a campaign by Cheryl Corbell, whose daughter Olivia Pratt-Corbell was shot in Liverpool. The man who killed her, Thomas Cashman, refused to come to court to hear his sentence. And the law will also apply to convicts like the Southport attacker who disrupt court proceedings. Andy Gill has this report.
All I want to know is what I'm arrested for.
Thomas Cashman arrested for murdering 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell in 2022. But he refused to come to the dock when he was sentenced to a minimum of 42 years in jail. Olivia's mum started a campaign to force criminals to face the music in court.
It's important for the offenders to listen to the pain that they've caused. Going to prison is supposed to be a rehabilitation. That first port of call of rehabilitation should be in that courtroom.
Now that campaign has moved a step closer to being fulfilled. A bill introduced in Parliament today that will mean additional sanctions for convicts who refuse to come to court.
Victims and Courts Bill.
Second reading what day?
Tomorrow.
Cheryl Corbell's reaction today, reflecting that the bill still has to pass into law. She said, "It's been a long road and we're not at the end of it just yet. It's going to mean a great deal. It'll mean that we haven't campaigned for nothing." The new bill would also apply to those like Southport killer Axel Rudakabana, who was in court for his sentencing, but who had to be removed when his continual shouting disrupted the hearing. Offenders could face an additional 2 years in jail. Those facing whole life orders could be confined to their cells or be stripped of privileges like extra gym time.
We're giving prison officers the opportunity to use reasonable force in order to get these perpetrators to their sentencing hearings, because we feel like it's necessary that they're there, that they hear their sentence, that they see their victims and survivors, they handed their sentence so that victims and survivors see justice being done.
The nurse serial killer Lucy Letby also refused to come to court for her sentencing. The Prison Officers Association thinks other options should be considered.
If you refuse to appear for sentencing, your entire sentence, you will not receive any family visits unless they are closed visits. So that means you visit behind a big plane of glass. There is no physical contact at all.
The government has thanked families like Olivia Pratt-Corbell's who've campaigned for offenders to face the reality of their crimes. Andy Gill, BBC North West Tonight, Liverpool.
A bomb disposal expert from the Isle of Man has been killed in Ukraine. Chris Garrett, a former tree surgeon, had set up the Prevail Together charity. It worked to clear mines and unexploded shells, and Chris had spent the last 3 years in Ukraine, as Ashley Tracy reports from Douglas.
Chris Garrett from Peel on the Isle of Man had spent years in Ukraine working to detonate and disarm explosive devices placed in the country by Russian soldiers. The 40-year-old had returned when war broke out in February 2022, having previously helped in the country between 2014 and 2017. Now we understand the Manxman has been killed in an incident near Izum in eastern Ukraine. An ambassador for the charity Prevail Together, which Mr Garrett co-founded, has confirmed that Chris has been killed whilst dismantling an improvised explosive device yesterday. On X, Sean Pinner described the news as devastating. Now, in 2022, my colleague spoke to Mr. Garrett when he was training troops in Kyiv, heading out to the front line, and he was instructing them on what to do if they came across a landmine.
I don't have to teach them how to clear the mines. I just need to teach them the basic awareness of, if they do find them, what's the best way to mitigate the risk? Because for the military, they have to move. For them to win this fight, they have to keep mobility at a maximum.
Well, the charity Prevail Together said it would share further updates after coordinating with investigation teams over the next 48 hours or so, but they can't comment any further at this stage. Perhaps a mark of how significant his impact was, Russian authorities claimed his mine clearance work amounted to terrorism, sentencing him to 14.5 years in jail in a proxy court in Donetsk earlier on this year. He leaves behind a partner and a young child.
It was Ashley Tracy reporting from the Isle of Man. Our thoughts with Chris Garrett's family tonight. Now, a trial into alleged breaches of fire safety regulations by 4 companies in Cheshire has collapsed, and formal not guilty verdicts have been entered against them all. Beechmere Retirement Village in Crewe, which housed about 150 residents, was destroyed by a fire in 2019. Today, 2 days into the trial, Cheshire Fire and Rescue Service said that it believed there's little chance of any convictions. 6 people have been charged with offences involving the supply of ketamine as part of a Lancashire police operation to tackle the supply of the drug. Operation Shore aims to prosecute those supplying ketamine and educate people about its dangers. As we reported last week, police made 15 arrests in Burnley, Padiham, Ramsbottom, Nelson and Huddersfield. The youngest detained was a 15-year-old boy. A major road's been closed to traffic in Greater Manchester after a sinkhole appeared. Bury New Road, which takes traffic to the M60 and Whitefield and towards Manchester city centre, is shut. A diversion's in place with drivers advised not to use junction 17 of the M60. A protest has taken place in Manchester today over government proposals to reduce benefits for many people with disabilities. Protesters gathered outside a hotel where drop-in sessions for a consultation on the plans have been taking place. The government says it intends to help more people back into work, but opponents say that they are worried that they will lose their personal independence payments.
These potential changes are a further attack on our lives, on our dignity and our existence. We've had 40 years of austerity, and this is a continuity government, and we need to stop these changes because we can't wait for them to go into effect.
Welfare payments, of course, one of the big political issues at the moment, and the fallout from last week's elections continued today. With an open letter from Labour MPs in our so-called red wall seats, they've written to their own government, expressing concerns about the threat to them posed by Reform UK. Welfare payments, as I mentioned, and immigration are 2 of the issues that they want addressing, as the MP for Crewe and Nantwich, Conor Naismith, told me a little earlier.
The point that me and other colleagues who have signed up to support that letter are making is that this really needs to be a wake-up call for all of us in progressive politics, that if we don't use this window of opportunity that we've got in government to deliver meaningful change for those communities who really need it most, who've been let down for such a long time by the Conservative Party, voters will turn to populist, right-wing alternatives like Reform, who I don't think have the answers, but I understand why voters have reached that point of impatience.
The issue of immigration is something, I'm sure, which came up on the doorstep, and that seems to have been the rich vein that Reform have tapped into. What would you like to see your government do about that?
So I think it's about giving people confidence that the government has control over our borders, over our security, over the economy and everything else.
Which you don't think it has, clearly, if you've written this letter.
Well, I think we've inherited a position where the government doesn't have control in many aspects of public life, and the government is taking steps to try and address that.
You have had a year. How long does it take to get control?
Well, I think things take longer than people would like. And look, part of the reason that I've signed that letter is that I would like things to move faster in the right direction.
Just changing topics for a moment. You asked a question at Prime Minister's Questions today about HS2 and the possibility of it now coming to Crewe. Of course, the Crewe leg was scrapped when it was scrapped coming to Manchester a couple of years ago. The Prime Minister responded by saying that was something that was being reviewed. What's your understanding of the situation?
I hope that government is seeing that actually what we're paying for at the minute, we're paying £70 billion for a rail line from London to Birmingham that nobody would have asked for in the beginning, whereas we've got an opportunity. And by the way, that plan actually restricts capacity on the West Coast Main Line, whereas if we just invest that little bit more to bring it to the north, it will do what it was intended to do and will deliver all the benefits in terms of driving economic growth, jobs and opportunities across my region and for my constituents. Whatever the government's decision is, I will keep making that case.
Conor Naismith, MP for Crewe and Nantwich, thanks for talking to us.
Thank you very much.
In that HS2 story, one of those cases have definitely watched this space, I think. Now, here are some of the other stories from BBC News, which people are reading this evening. Merseyside Police's top job has just been filled, as you might know, but the force has revealed it only had one application for the post of Chief Constable. That's the Police and Crime Commissioner you can see in the picture. Parking charges for politicians are going to be reintroduced on the Isle of Man next month. They were suspended around the time of the pandemic 5 years ago. And a not-so-secret beauty spot. Visitors have been flocking to a valley in Cumbria, which is known for its annual Bluebell display. You can find out more at bbc.co.uk/local news, or, of course, take a look on the BBC News app. Notice we didn't tell you the name of that secret valley, did we? But you'll find it if you read the story online. Now, Martin Mere in West Lancashire is one of the region's great nature reserves. It's managed by the Wildfowl and Wetlands Trust, and it's home to tens of thousands of resident and migrating birds, but it is drying out, and its vast reed beds need some serious work. Now, a 3-year restoration project is about to get underway, as Lindsay Prosser reports.
600 acres of wetland and reed beds provide vital habitat for hundreds of species of birds.
They're incredibly important. This reed bed of this size, there's actually only 50 left in the UK. They're incredibly rare and they support a wide diversity of life, not just birds, but insects and a wide variety of plants as well.
The site needs to be managed to provide the ideal habitat. A £200,000 donation from Liverpool-based firm CMA CGM, which supports environmental projects, will pay for 3 years of improvement works.
We've got a great plan of works to do, so we need to reduce the amount of scrub in the reed bed. The scrub is drying it out, sucking up the water and shading out the reeds. We also need to control the water levels, be able to vary them for the different reed beds and for the different species that are living here. And then we need to also make fish refuges.
For birds, Martin Mere is the equivalent of a motorway service station. Somewhere to rest and fuel up.
There are thousands of birds in the reed bed behind me, and they have nested here. At the moment they're singing to claim their territory.
The wet grassland at Martin Mere also needs improvement, as it's becoming too dry.
It's incredible rich diversity, but the water levels are really low. All the ditches are connected and the water is pumped away to keep the surrounding farmland dry enough to grow agricultural crops. But it means that it's draining the wetland. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to install tilting weirs to be able to increase the groundwater level just at Martin Mere.
It's hoped the work will not only attract wildlife, but also more visitors wanting to learn about birds. Lindsay Prosser, BBC North West Tonight, Martin Mere.
It is a beautiful place if you get a chance to visit. Now, we're going to meet a pretty remarkable guy now. His name's Sean Slicker. He's from Oldham. Sean was diagnosed with Parkinson's at the age of 23, and that soon began to restrict his movement. Well, weight training in the gym became Sean's therapy, and he is now competing to become the country's strongest disabled person. Kevin Fitzpatrick has been to see him.
Their strongman disciplines with a difference. Sean Slickers in a category for competitors with limited ability in their lower limbs, so he's only allowed to use his upper body to lift, push or pull.
I'm in seated class, means if I use any part of my lower body or limbs or butt cheeks, lift my bum off the chair whatsoever, I'm disqualified.
He's got into strongman events after years of weight training to cope with Parkinson's, which has seen him use a wheelchair in recent years. And playing to the crowd is something he's enjoyed.
Keep it going! Like you see all the celebrities like Mark Felix, Eddie Hall, Stoltman Brothers, and you think, oh, they're big. Then you go into the arena and you've got crowds watching you. I always say, whatever you lift in training, you can lift 5, maybe 10 kilograms more on your event day due to the crowd, the buzz. So it's like the adrenaline's all over.
There have been disabled strongmen and women competitions for some years now, but finding a gym to accommodate Sean's needs was a challenge. This one in Warrington's made adaptations to encourage more people with disabilities to give strength training a try.
We pushed everything to the side to give a bit of a gap. Then also our doors, each room was closed with a door. So that was a massive limitation, so we took off a lot of doors to make it flow better. I know there's not many gyms, especially for strongmen, that offer accessibility for them, so I'd love to be a hub for get more people who've got limitations to come down and actually see this is a sport I actually could get into.
He's now training here every day with other strongmen and women competitors who acknowledge the extra challenge he faces.
I can use my legs, my arms and everything, it's make me easier to do it. But when you see him doing this lift, you see it's completely different, you need to isolate specific muscle, it's harder, and you appreciate it so much more.
With new regional competitions starting up, disabled athletes like Sean have more opportunities to make their mark. And in the upcoming national championships, he's confident he can.
I got the right set up in this gym, I got the right staff members helping me here. So yeah, this year is going to be one to look out for, trust me.
Kevin Fitzpatrick, BBC North West Tonight, Warrington.
Now, good luck, Sean. It could well be Sean's year. Now, as you will know, tomorrow marks the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War in Europe. This week, we've been looking at some of the events taking place to mark the milestone. And today, there was a performance by the National Theatre at the Imperial War Museum North at Trafford in Greater Manchester. It starred performers like Mel Gedroic. I'm sure you remember her as one of the former presenters of Great British Bake Off. And it brought to life personal letters from those who were caught up in the war. Matt Trewern has this report.
Letters to loved ones, a vital connection between soldiers on the front line and those waiting anxiously at home.
It's not been an easy victory, and we must remember Jimmy and Basil, who've given their lives in this cause.
And some of those real-life stories of love, loss, courage, and sometimes just ordinary news have been shared in a one-off performance here at the Imperial War Museum North.
This is the day before mobile phones, of course, and a day when a telegram, I think, either meant a very, very good piece of news or a very, very bad piece of news. So the letter became the way to kind of spill your heart and tell the person that you're writing to exactly what you're feeling. Even if they're really mundane things, they're very poignant.
Dear Freddie, Mummy has written and told me what a good boy you are. I'm very pleased with you, my son.
The letters being performed were sent in by members of the public, personal family stories of wartime Britain.
It's a wonderful comparison and contrast to the national commemorations that we've had this week, focusing on those people who were there, their personal experiences, and I think in many ways how today we can relate to those experiences.
Human spirit that is mightier than war.
Among the performers was the Manchester poet Tony Walsh.
There's people who are quite blithely hopping over real hardship, and then there's a frightfully posh lady who's complaining that somebody's pinched a lettuce from a vegetable patch, So there's all stories, great and small, but it adds up to what was millions of human stories combined.
Today's performance was just a one-off, but as the country continues to mark the 80th anniversary of VE Day, you can get online and read some of these original letters to loved ones.
It's a real honour to be involved with this, actually, because it makes you think everybody was touched by this war, but people got on with their lives. I don't know how people did it. It's amazing.
Matt Trewern, BBC Northwest Tonight.
Yeah, that's probably a question many of us have asked ourselves. Don't know how people did it. There'll be many more events to mark VE Day 80 on the anniversary itself tomorrow. We'll have a special edition of Northwest Tonight for you as well to reflect some of what's going on around the region. But how did people in the Northwest celebrate that long-awaited announcement 80 years ago? Well, Kelly Foran has been looking through the newspaper archives.
Tuesday, May the 8th, 1945, VE Day dawned with joy, relief, a little bit of rain and a lot of confusion. The official victory announcement was to be made at 3 o'clock, but no one knew whether it was supposed to be a holiday or not, so thousands turned up for work to find many offices and factories closed for the day.
Confusion over the VE Day arrangements resulted in unhappy experiences for thousands of people across the north. Workers in Trafford Park expressed their annoyance that the holiday had been so badly handled.
By mid-afternoon, the crowds were already gathering here in Albert Square to hear Churchill's speech. It was being relayed to the crowds by a team from the BBC's Manchester office, and a Pathé News crew were here to record the scene.
Hostilities will end officially at 1 minute after midnight tonight, Tuesday, the 8th of May.
After that, it was party time. The Evening News reported that the crowds were joyous, but not hysterical. Their photographer caught this scene of sailors dancing on the statue of John Dalton.
Pathé News also captured the celebrations of women workers at an unidentified Manchester factory. Pubs were allowed to stay open until 11:30, but the Evening News reported that beer, spirits and cigarettes had run out long before closing time.
Here in Liverpool, there were huge crowds at St George's Plateau. People were even dancing on the War Memorial. At 3 o'clock, the River Mersey erupted as the ferries and ships sounded their horns.
The 2.5 million people who live on Merseyside are celebrating the long-awaited VE Day. Listen to this voice of Liverpool.
And thousands of people gathered here at the town hall to hear the victory speech. But amongst all of those celebrations, there was recognition of the cost of war.
In the background to these joyous scenes was the Great Gap torn by enemy bombs, a symbol amid the celebrations of what the city has suffered and her very special reason for gratitude that the end has come.
Up in Lancashire, things seem to be a bit more low-key. The Burnley Express reported that the crowds were large but not animated. And the Lancashire Daily Post described disappointment of the crowd outside Preston Town Hall.
Just before 3, they turned to the Town Hall steps, evidently expecting either the PM's speech or a public proclamation. But as the clock struck the hour and nothing happened, they began to drift away.
Preston's dance halls were advertising special VE night events, although some of those might have been fighting a losing battle. There was an advert in the Daily Post for the Poultry Management Conference at the Guildhall, and that included this slightly forlorn plea.
Poultrymen, celebrate VE Day by attending this important and interesting event.
I wonder how many turned up to that one then. We've come just north of Preston Town Centre to Hesketh Street, standing on the very spot where 80 years ago people came out of these houses for a street party. They've been planning for it for weeks, carefully saving up their rations, cobbling together treats for the children. And that moment was captured by a Lancashire Evening Post photographer. Years of blood, sweat and tears had come to an end for Hesketh Street, and for every other street. The war was over.
Maybe you were one of those who's old enough to remember, but for the rest of us, it's just amazing to think what those emotions must have been like 80 years ago. As I say, special edition of the programme tomorrow evening, lots of veterans in it. And let us know what you're doing. Send us your pictures, nwt@bbc.co.uk on email, and we'll use as many of them as we can. All importantly, Abby, what's the weather going to be like tomorrow?
Yes, very important weather forecast, and it is looking dry, thankfully. In fact, it's looking to stay dry over the next few days. Let's have a quick look at some weather photos that have been sent in today, shall we? A gorgeous mackerel sky captured by David up on the low in Marple first thing, and then the blue skies did pop out for Darwin on the dog walk later as we headed through to the afternoon. I think we will see plenty of blue sky over the next few days. If you do manage to capture a weather photo and you would like to send it in to us here at North West Tonight, you can do so by sending them directly into me on social media, or you can sign up and become one of our BBC Weather Watchers as well. And all those weather photos come directly into us here at the Weather Centre. So the headline for tomorrow, another dry and settled day. There will, at times, a bit like today, be variable, often large areas of cloud, but that cloud will thin and break. And as we head through to the afternoon, we will see brighter skies and increasing amounts of sunshine, all thanks to this big area of high pressure that is really just firmly centred slap bang over the middle of the UK over the next few days. It shifts a little this weekend, a little further east, so that will start to pull in slightly cooler winds, but our temperatures are actually on the rise, so we could be back in the low 20s by the time we reach the weekend. This is how things are looking overnight tonight. A little bit cloudier over the Pennines, and here we could see 1 or 2 light showers. The cloud building elsewhere into the early hours of tomorrow morning, but where we do hang on to any of those clearer skies, we could see a little bit of mistiness forming. These will be our overnight temperatures, so fairly chilly, I think. If you are out and about first thing tomorrow morning, you're going to need a few layers. But as the day progresses, the cloud will gradually thin and break, and we will, a bit like today, see some brighter spells. I put bright spells as opposed to sunny spells. I think there will, still be a bit of cloud into the afternoon, and our temperatures, much like today, will reach about 16 or 17 degrees Celsius. In exposure of the easterly breeze, although it's not going to be particularly strong, it will still take the edge off temperatures ever so slightly. But as we head towards the weekend, we are shifting into a slightly milder air mass, so our temperatures through Friday and Saturday are going to be a bit higher. We could see 20, maybe 21 degrees Celsius, but that does bring the risk of a potential for a thundery breakdown through Sunday. So Sunday we may start to see a few heavy showers or thunderstorms. Friday, though, looking dry, plenty of sunshine, much like Saturday, and our temperatures will respond to that sun. 21 degrees, Rog.
Because it was a bank holiday, Kay didn't tell us who sent in, is it Moseley Common? Which is the place on the weather map this week, so she's here tomorrow. So
I can't remember who sent it in, but I did put it on.
Well, if it was you, well done.
Yes.
Thank you. You can get your place on the weather map, as you know, by emailing nwt@bbc.co.uk. She's here tomorrow.
She is, she's back. Yeah.
Right, we'll find out. And if you're doing anything for VE Day, don't forget, of course, please do let us know. Send us your pictures to the same email address. Have a great evening.
Good night.